Yep, we're now recording to the cloud.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Magic phrase. Please proceed.
You click record.
Thank you. So welcome everybody who's joining us. This is the first meeting for our 24-25 budget process and budget message. And so I just want to make sure that everybody is able to see my screens. I've just changed over, and so this current slide should show what we are going to be going over today, which starts with the budget process overview, our county-wide budget message, and our service district's budget message. Is this something that you all see right now?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Moving forward, so local budget law is what drives this entire budgeting process for the county. And it's not just a few months that we're working on this. This is something that takes, it's an annual process. We start with the budget preparation, and that is work that is done by staff. And then we go into the approval process, which involves you all as the budget committee. And then it moves forward for adoption to the board. And then there's the execution part, which again goes back to staff. So the actual preparation portion of all of this takes us about 6 months to complete. And then the execution process is something that's happening all year long. So the 24-25 budget, as soon as July 1 kicks off, we're executing it, and we're maintaining it and evaluating it on a day-to-day basis. The purpose of all of this is to make sure that we are being fiscally responsible and that we are transparent with the entirety of our budget and our budget process. It enables the public, the taxpayers, investors, everybody involved to know how our budget is being administered by the county. So the budget committee roles and responsibilities, and I'm going to apologize because I just kicked this off and I am stepping on Andy's toes. And so I'm going to turn this over now to our budget and finance director, Andy Sullivan.
I'm going to say anything. I was going to let you keep going there. I appreciate your intro. No, thank you, Assistant County Manager Monica Steele. I'll kind of pick up here on some of the budget committee roles and responsibilities. As Monica was mentioning, the Board of Commissioners appoints 5 budget committee members who serve for a 3-year term. Some of the primary duties of the budget committee include hearing the budget message, which we're doing today, consider all the various factors during the proposed budget, and ultimately approve the budget. Upon approval of the budget, the appointed budget committee role is completed, and the board will hold a public hearing on June 12th. At the conclusion of the hearing on the 12th, the board adopts the budget. Next slide. Thank you. Some of the services that are required by law are listed in front of you, and as you can see, these are some of the more vital components to the county. All of these services are very unique and complicated in nature, and many variables are considered when prioritizing where and how the county needs to budget resources. And these are done in tandem with county staff. We'll do next slide. Thanks. So here's kind of the layout of the budget document, the format itself. This is nearly a 700-page document for those of you who are lucky enough to get a hard copy of this big document. So just kind of in general terms, how it's kind of laid out. I'm not going to touch on every single one of these, but as you kind of get into more of the the lion's share of the document, when we start going into the statistical and supporting section, it's general information about the county as an organization, as well as an overview about the county as a community. Describes the budgeted fund structure, the functional areas, an overview of the general fund, what services funded primarily by either discretionary or dedicated resources, policies, and the board goals and long-range financial plans that drive the budgeting process. The financial summary provides charts and tables to explain visually the resources and expenditures that make up the 24-25 budget year in comparison to prior year's actuals. And from there, it kind of delves deeper into the functional areas, some of the limited inactive budgets, and then the appendix to refer to for different kinds of terms and definitions. And with that, I'll pass it back over to our Assistant County Manager, Steele, to go over the budget message.
Thank you, Andy. And also just in regards to the appendix section, this is also where you're going to find the work plans that include the goals and measures for the various departments. And so that is at the end of the document as well. So as we get started on the 24-25 budget message, or before we get started, I just want to confirm if there's any questions from anybody, and I'm going to rely on Commissioner Thompson because I am unable to see if anybody is raising their hands right now.
I see no raised hands. If
Perfect.
if that's an error, please speak up. Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So as Dawn mentioned, there are a number of you who assist us through this process, and we appreciate you all greatly. And so our citizen committee members include from District 1, Danelle Davis, from District 2, Tita Montero, District 3, David Ogier, District 4, Gretchen Allen, and District 5, Clara Schroof, who is our newest budget committee member. And then, of course, we have our Board of Commissioners, Chair Quila, Vice Chair Bangs, Commissioner Toyoka, Commissioner Webb, and Commissioner Thompson, who is gracious enough to chair today's Budget Committee meeting. This is also an endeavor that we couldn't do without our management team, as well as many of their staff who assist them in this process. And so some of the newest members that we have on our team that got to have this experience for the first time this year include our new Budget and Finance Director, Andy Sullivan, our new Facilities Manager, Matthew Gerber. Rebecca Cameron was here briefly at the beginning of last year from our HR department. And then we also have Amanda Gladix, who has worked for the 4-H and Extension Office for a number of years, but she has kind of taken over the budget process role on behalf of Tammy Olds from 4-H and Extension, who has retired. And I'm going to go ahead now and turn it over to Don, our county manager, as he kind of sets the tone for how this budget process came to be this year.
Thank you, Monica. I'm just going to look to Commissioner Thompson. Can you hear me okay, Commissioner? Okay, thank you. Good morning, everybody. I want to thank you for your time. Thank you for all of your expertise and energy that you'll be putting into the budget process. I'm going to take a little time just to kind of tell the story of where the county is. And so I do have slides, but as is my habit, I don't always read off the slides, and I may just tangentially refer to them. But when I'm all done speaking, hopefully I've told kind of a cogent story. The one thing that I'll start with is that being a public sector manager means that no day is alike and it is never boring. And I think over the last 2 years, and certainly over the last year, there has been a number of challenges and opportunities for the county that we have been engaged with very actively. And some of them are moving the needle in terms of the safety, the livability, and the sustainability of the community. And at the same time, others are creating a direct challenge for us, maintaining some of those services and meeting the service levels of the community as we move forward. I'm going to talk a lot about the challenges in just a few minutes, but I want to talk about some of the opportunities and some of the positive things that have been happening with the county. And when I say county, I really mean the entire community. I believe that counties are just one service provider that is essential to provide all the services that a community needs. And we do that through direct services, but we also do that through collaboration. And the collaboration isn't just with other public sector agencies, it's with the nonprofit sector, it's with the business sector, it's with the civic sector, as well as the religious. And we put a lot of energy and effort into formalizing, strengthening these interconnectivities between all these different sectors of the community, because we acknowledge that the services and the service challenges that are in the community require us to act with some coordinated muscle movement as we try to make an impact on the community. And I will say, COVID started this kind of collaboration, but it continues today. And I think that's what the future holds for us, is that every organization, whether it's cities, counties, special districts, nonprofit agencies, we all need each other to be successful. And so I'm very gratified by the partnership ethos that's been reinforced over the last several years. And I know that with the leadership of our board, that the county's efforts will continue in that area. So that's a big win for the county and for the whole community. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the fact that, if you can go on to the next slide. Well, a lot of what the progress is over the last year is really what I call civic barn raising, because no one organization holds all of the resources, all the supplies, all the expertise to get things done. And we're tackling some pretty significant challenges, whether it's the homeless challenge, childcare, behavioral health care, addiction treatment, environmental issues, economic issues. All of these issues require a whole community to come together and then identify what resources every entity has, what they can contribute, and then try to weave that into a cogent response. And there's been some amazing work done over the last years that I think are reflective in services to the community. I think you're seeing a lot of capacity being built in service to the homeless community. You're seeing a lot of innovative efforts regarding the economic development, environmental, and you're just seeing agencies helping each other. One of the things we benefited from was the ARPA dollars, which came out of the federal COVID spending, and the county received just about $7.8 million. And we've certainly been spending that in a very diverse and very community-oriented way, dealing with some of the challenges within public health, which was the originating factor for those funds, but also investing in the infrastructure of the county and the infrastructure of our community partners. And so in the Other Opportunities Fund, we have highlighted where some of those resources have been going. And again, I think it's a testament to the board that really wanted to have these resources touch every corner of the community and in those priority areas. Next slide. So besides all the positives and all the great community initiatives that the county is certainly involved in, there's the day in and day out work that I just want to recognize the nearly 300 county employees that are carrying the torch every day, problem solving, providing quality services, and always looking at ways for the county to manage our relevance with the community better. Managing our relevance is really important to me, because if a government's not relevant, then we have some major problems. And you see a lot of those problems in some other communities, and that's just something we do not want to experience here. So there's a lot of great work that goes on every day for what I would term those more regular duties, those more regular services that are often invisible to a lot of our community unless it's something that you access. If you want to record a property, then you get to know the clerk's office. If you are having issues with your voter registration, you obviously also get to know the clerk's office. But there's just great work that gets done, and these are great ambassadors for our organization and for the community. So I'm going to talk about some of the challenges because these challenges are real, and they are something that that we are going to need help addressing. And if we don't get help addressing them, and when I say help, I mean mainly from our state legislators. If we don't receive help, then the organization will have a plan to make some pretty dramatic cuts into our services and service levels. So I'm going to go back a little bit and recognize that the county has been in a deficit spending mode for the last several years. This was planned. We had a large fund balance reserve. And when the HCP and the economy and some other factors started challenging us, we knew that those reserves were there to help us get through. The whole notion was it's not sustainable over time, but we wanted it to provide the runway so that we could fully engage the legislature on revenue replacement for the HCP, as well as to hopefully get some redress on some of the impacts of tourism that are taking place in some of those high volume tourism counties. And I'll talk a little bit about that. So where we are today has been a plan. The county has been making a lot of adjustments and preparing ourselves for what might happen really in the budget preparation process for the 25-26 year. We anticipate at the end of the 2024-25 budget, the county will still be above the 30% fund balance goal that the board has set. Now, the minimum is 20%, but just we need to have flexibility. And so 30% is kind of where we aim for. We anticipate ending the 2024-25 budget year, north of that 30%. Right now we're thinking that we'll be somewhere around 33%, but there's also going to be a lot of effort to actually increase what our position is. So a lot's going to happen during 2024-25. It's not reflected in the 2024-25 budget, but the county has already been looking at where the general fund subsidy goes. We've been looking at the fee structures, making sure that the fees are covering the full cost of service. We're looking at managing during the year differently by keeping vacant positions open, doing everything we can to maximize that beginning fund balance. Because what happens in January of 2025 is that the legislature will be meeting, and there's been ongoing conversations with the governor's office and with the CFTLC counties, which is the Council for Forest Trust Land counties, which are the counties that are most impacted by the HCP, about what that revenue replacement strategy might look like. We're also engaged with our lobbyists and with legislators about a legislative concept to modify the transient lodging tax distribution to allow more flexibility for counties. Can you go back one slide, Monica? I'm sorry that I'm not keeping to the slides, but trying to get some more flexibility on the transient lodging tax. And so those are two big pushes for the county, and very important. We're not resting on our laurels thinking that those things are going to absolutely happen. We have to plan as though they won't happen. And so we will be going through the exercise during the 2024-25 year of what kind of expenditure reductions would we need to make if those revenues don't come to us. And I'm not an optimist, but I'm not a pessimist either. I kind of try to fall in what is most likely. What's most likely as we move forward is there will be some select expenditure reductions, and there will be some help from the state on the revenue side. I think the state understands that there are a handful of counties that are majorly impacted both by the HCP and by tourism. And I'm going to be pragmatically optimistic that somebody will kind of help us and will see the light and provide a runway for us so that we can continually manage the organization. Some of the other things that are challenges is the cost of healthcare and prescriptions for the adults in custody. As you know, when someone is in the county custody, and that means in the jail, we have a responsibility both legally and morally to make sure that they're taken care of. And so providing those services and that healthcare is a local expense. There's been a lot of effort to try to make eligibility for folks that are in custody for programs such as OHP. And those efforts continue both at the federal level and at the state level. Another cost factor and challenge, which will be ongoing, is the public employee retirement system costs. And then, of course, we have the highest per capita homelessness rate, and that is just a continual challenge that the cities, the county, and a lot of our nonprofit, religious, and civic partners are all working on. So go ahead, Monica. So as we say this, part of the capacity that the county has to have is just not to collaborate with our partners, but we have to advocate for ourselves effectively. And that's something that hasn't always been at the pinnacle of our priorities. And so over the last couple of years, we've invested resources in federal and state lobbyists. Commissioner Thompson, with her leadership down at AOC, and other board members through their partnerships and their liaison responsibilities, we have been advocating much more effectively, not just for the county's interest, but I would say for the community's interest. And sometimes it's beyond the community, it's for the coastal community interest. And that's going to continue. We've received additional funding from the state to address some of the homeless challenges because of our advocacy and the board's advocacy. We continue to get grant monies. The sheriff's office has been successful getting grant monies to replace the record management system, which impacts all the cities. Also, we have an aggressive federal agenda with a number of priorities on it. So part of what we have been doing is looking ahead and saying, how do we position ourselves for these conversations that we know we're going to have with the decision makers that will be consequential for the county. And so, so that's where a lot of our effort has also been going. Next slide, please. So, as I always say, the budget is just a point in time. How we manage the budget says a lot about what our financial position is moving forward. We generally spend about 90% of the appropriated levels, and that's by design. So at the federal level, oftentimes they spend 100% because they're not going to get it back if they don't spend it. Here, we actually expect it to come back, and we give direction to our departments that we expect them to not spend all of their appropriations. Now, for some, that can be a little bit easier because they have vacancies during the fiscal year. But we require them to make some of those tough decisions about what they're actually going to need and what they're going to spend. And so this is the way that the county maintains those fund balances. The board has been providing great leadership for the county, and this is generational leadership, but certainly the current board has been providing that also, that they want to have enough reserves so that the county isn't in a panic mode and having to tear down in the process of trying to really respond to what we know always happens, which is the unexpected. The unexpected always happens within government. And so the reserve just helps us to deal with the unexpected. So that 20 to 30% range is where we will maintain. 30% is way more comfortable for me personally. As we've seen, things happen. And again, based on the projection models for the end of 24-25, so the end of next fiscal year will still be at around 33%. So that's the runway that we're using to allow the legislature to hopefully help us figure out how much do we need to reduce and how much will there be in revenue replacement. So this is just a little chart that just highlights some of the headwinds that the county's dealing with, and then what our strategy is moving forward. So one of the headwinds really quickly was inflation and just the economy, supply chain issues, all kinds of different challenges post-COVID. Really, these are the types of influences that the reserve is for, because they tend to be episodic. They can sometimes last a little bit longer than you hope, but sometimes they last a little bit, they are shorter duration. So but that's what we rely on the reserve for. And so the reserve has been helping us fund that because, as we know, inflation has been high. When inflation's high, that means the cost of doing everything we do, including, personnel costs, are also higher. And so that's the role of the reserves, and it's been playing that role effectively. We have some other major systemic issues, and I've mentioned both, but one is the impacts of tourism. And this is legitimate. We had a study done by Eco Northwest, that showed that a number of vital service areas are majorly impacted. And it's really around, public safety, transportation, emergency management, to a degree, public health. But as just one example, a third of the folks that are in the sheriff's custody are from outside the county. And then those are folks that also go through the county courts system, which the county pays for the prosecution side, and we pay for all the facilities. And so there are expensive and non-revenue supported services that the county is reporting, is providing. And so, based on the Eco Northwest study, we're a community of about 40,000, but there are times when we're a community of 120 to 150,000. And so the stress that puts on our systems right now is not recovered through the revenue sources. And so one of the things we would like to have the legislature do is to amend the transit lodging tax formula to allow high volume tourism communities more flexibility in how we spend those monies. Currently, for any of the new rates past 2003, 70% goes to tourism promotion and 30% is discretionary. We would like to see more of that be discretionary while still contributing to the tourism promotion piece. Go ahead. I think there's a question.
Yeah, I know that some of the local mayors are working on this same issue. Are you working in conjunction with them?
I've had meetings with all the city managers, and we've shared the legislative concept. So
Okay,
yes.
great. Thank you.
Thank you. So the next, and just as an example, for the impacts of tourism piece, what the legislative concept for the county is 30% would still be dedicated to tourism, and basically 70% would be discretionary, even though we said 40% would be dedicated to the impacts of tourism. But for the county, just freeing up that 40% for the impacts of tourism would be over $1 million a year. And so I'm just throwing that out, that's a significant, revenue source if we could get it. And this is not increasing the transit lodging tax. This is just redistributing what is already collected. And so, so we will see where that goes legislatively. There's 3 other counties, coastal counties, that fall into this high tourism threshold, and that would be Curry County, Lincoln County, and Tillamook County. And so we'll be talking to the coastal county senators and representatives as we move forward and see if we can't get a little headwind or a little wind behind ourselves. The next one is the timber revenue. I won't spend a lot of time on it. I think most of the budget committee and the board know where we are. There's ongoing conversations with the governor's office. There's been a commitment, but we're not sure what that commitment looks like. And again, until the legislature does something, we don't have any guarantees. And so, so we will see where that goes. I think there's another question, Mr. Oger.
Yes, I just wanted to ask, I think governments have a pretty good idea to how to measure the direct effect of the loss of timber revenue, but how do you measure, and are you able to take into consideration all of the indirect effects of lost jobs or other types of negative impacts that this would have on Clatsop County?
And that's a great question. And what I would say is it's a lot harder for us. I mean, we do have general indicators of what some of those job losses might be like. And I don't know if Commissioner Thompson has any more information, but I know Colpack was going to be doing a study about what some of those secondary impacts are, so that we can understand those better. As part of the HCP, what the county asked of the governor's office was to not only address the revenue replacement issues, which is just, direct payments to the county and the special districts and the cities, but it was also to really partner with us on dealing with some of these secondary impacts, which are more economically driven, whether it's jobs, whether it's sector impacts, whether it's workforce training impacts. And so we made that request to the state. We're still waiting to hear, but I think that the work Colpack does will help inform some of those conversations as we move forward.
If I may weigh in on that, excellent question, because what we're looking to do is to reweave the fabric of community. It isn't just, as you point out, the direct income, it's the whole culture. And we're told sometimes, oh, you can reinvent your economy, as if it were a 1, 2, 3 and done kind of thing. If that were so, it would have already happened. But I appreciate the question, and I hope that we carry forward with us as we deliberate, as we're informed and improved by the participation of the citizen budget advisors, that we wrestle with this kind of issue as well as just the numbers. Thank you, County Manager. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you. If I will say, in my previous job over in Washington County, economic development back in the 80s and the 90s was a really big, issue. And you look at what that county in particular had in its favor, which it had a large workforce. It had property, industrial property, commercial property. It had areas to expand, and then it had land use that was a lot more flexible because there's not wetlands, inundation zones, slide zones. It's just a very different, and they have transportation that we don't have, including rail. And so, Clatsop County is just unique in so many ways, and that uniqueness makes us proud, and we're proud of the culture and the heritage, but it also makes it a little more complicated as we look at what is next. I mean, what is the vision for what the next 20 years looks like, and what those economic factors are as we move forward? Because I think we all have the same goals. Is we want family wage jobs, we want a safe, sustainable community. And so And so, then that's why I think the governor's office hopefully will partner with us, because I think having all the regulatory partners at the table with us will help, and then hopefully they could actually guide some very specific resources into the community to help us implement whatever comes out of that strategy. And then again, the other one is just jail medical. I won't spend a lot of time on that, but it's an ongoing challenge. So when somebody comes into the jail, not everybody's healthy, as you can imagine. And some of the medical requirements are very expensive. And so what we ultimately hope is that the federal government through Medicaid, as well as the state through Oregon Health Plan, will help us make sure that the adults in custody get the care that they need, but also help the local governments that are paying the bill for those services. Next, please. Okay, so that is my budget message in a brief summary. Monica and Andy are going to walk through a lot of the details of the budget, but I wanted to take any questions about kind of what I have presented. Again, part of what I want to leave you with is that the county is not in a sustainable position right now. We know that, but we want to use the runway that the reserves have provided, and we have made some modifications. I mean, this year there's a reduction in some staff. We've been modifying our revenue mix, but it isn't sustainable. So 2024-25 is going to be the time where we put different contingencies together. One contingency will be we get no help. How do we balance the budget with no help? And then off of that is we do get help. And what's the mix between revenue and expenditures to help us get to that sustainable place? So if I'm really thinking about it, we had to wait until this time because the HCP just moved forward earlier in the year. You know, the economy hopefully will eventually, you know, simmer down a bit. And when I say simmer, I mean inflation simmer down, not the economy. But you know, we needed to preserve the critical services that the county provides. And this is something that is conversations with the board, is conversations with the sheriff, is conversations with all of our department directors. I mean, this is a team sport. It's not just the county manager. It's not just the board of commissioners. It's all of us working in tandem to try to do the best thing we can. But 2024-25 is going to be big. And, you know, we will have a plan to deal with whatever happens. We will stay above the board, you know, required reserve levels. But I think we're all hoping that the state will help us out so that we can provide the services and the service levels that the community needs. So that's kind of my summary of the budget message. I think Commissioner Toyoka might have a question.
Thank you, County Manager. No, you know, and I've always remained hopeful, but in terms of budgeting, I am pessimistic about the assistance from the state. I think since that biennium process we might be top of mind for through the first budget cycle. But after that, I think other pending, you know, highlights will take over, and, you know, Clatsop County will fall to the wayside. So as we look at our budgeting processes, I'm more in favor of looking at how do we help ourselves, you know, instead of relying upon outside intervention, but how do we internally take care of ourselves? And if we do get that extra assistance, then it's a bonus that we can look at. But I would be hesitant to say, let's factor in and rely upon that outside assistance from the state, because I truly don't believe it'll be there in the long term.
As soon as you click.
Just my opinion.
Yeah, and thank you, Commissioner. And I don't disagree. I think that you know, we're going to be hopeful because that would make a difference. And if the commitment is for the long term, at least for the TLT, just, you know, formula change and or for the HCP revenue replacement, those are just foundational issues. But I think you are right that the county has to have some sense of manifest destiny and to do those things that are within our control. And staff will put those on the table as we work through this with the board and with others through the year. Because there are some things that don't require additional, taxes on residents, but it's just how we approach and what other levers that we want to try to pull as we deal with some of the other intergovernmental revenues that the state gives us that may not be equitably distributed that we might want to chase down, or it could just be how we engage in the fee structures of the county to make sure that the services are paid for by the users. And so there's a lot of things that we can consider. And I think that it is going to be a balancing act between expenditures and revenues. There will be expenditure reductions as we move forward. But I don't see that as diminishing service and service levels. It'll just be things that we marginally do to help us right the ship. At least that's my optimistic view. And if it doesn't turn out that way, the reality is we will do what we have to do, but we're going to do it in collaboration with, with obviously the board, with the directors, the elected officials, and with our employees and our partners. Because again, when you do this collaboratively, we're all in this together. A strong county makes the community stronger. Strong cities make the community stronger. Strong special districts makes it stronger. Strong business community makes it stronger. So we're all in this together. So.
Thank you, Don. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Andy now to kind of walk us through the proposed countywide budget, excluding the 4 districts.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you, County Manager, for your comments and putting all this into context, kind of setting the stage as we dive into some of the numbers. As you see in front of you, this is the current proposed countywide budget, less the 4 service districts. Currently, the proposed budget is approximately $98 million, which is about $1 million less from last year. In consideration of the budget policies, as well as the current economic climate and uncertainties around harvesting levels with the proposed HCP, they were an important factor in the development of the 24-25 proposed budget. The proposed decrease is primarily a result of the decreased materials and service costs in the amount of $2.9 million and is offset slightly by increased personnel services of approximately 1.6. Most of those increases are associated with cost of living adjustments, healthcare, and retirement costs. Of the 24-25 budget amount, $24.8 million is budgeted contingency compared to last year's adopted amount of about 26.3, which is approximately $1.5 million decrease. And looks like Commissioner Thompson has a question.
I do, sir. To Mr. Ozer's cogent question, when we're predicting decreased revenue, it's such an inexact science, but do we have any capacity to estimate not just the loss in timber sale revenue, but the impact on job loss and company closures or other adjustments?
So I completely understand that. I mean, again, that's a great question. I would be willing to say, and Monica, please chime in if you'd like, we don't really, have incorporated what that ripple effect could mean within the community. Right now, the focus really is on what is within our ability to maintain services given the information that we have now. Monica, is there anything else on that?
Sure, I'll just add in from a local government revenue perspective in regards to the resources that we receive from the state. That's the businesses, if there are business closures and such, where we would see the impacts from something like that would be on property taxes, people not being able to pay their property taxes. In many instances, there are bank loans, and so the banks are going to be covering those costs. So similar to what happened back in 2008 with the recession back then, many of the banks were making those property tax payments so that the properties did not go into foreclosure. Where we may see other expenses come from is oftentimes when people are unemployed, they're needing the Oregon Health Plan. And so we may see more utilization of resources such as our public health department being able to provide some of the services that many local healthcare providers don't offer at a more affordable rate. So the revenue side of our resources is really coming from those property tax revenues and those timber revenues and then the state revenues. Does that help, Commissioner?
Thanks, Monica. Could probably go to the next slide, I think. Thanks. So as we look at the personnel services kind of over the course of time and what we're proposing for 24-25, our staff is our most important resource, and they account for a little more than half of the countywide budget at approximately 52%. Changes in personnel services include a decrease of 3.4 FTE from 265.6 in 23-24, and a proposed count of 262.2 for 24-25. Other changes to personnel services include increases due to an anticipated cost of living adjustment of approximately 3.5%, as well as budget increases for cost of healthcare and retirement. In addition to that, within the county organization, there are 5 union groups that represent approximately 72% of the total FTE, with management and unrepresented at approximately 28%.
Thanks, Andy. And I just want to chime in here in regards to the decrease, the proposed decrease in FTE. These are not currently filled positions, so this is not a loss of a job for anybody. These are currently positions that are vacant and would be held vacant and not budgeted for.
Thank you for clarifying that. As we're kind of take a look at some of the proposed budgeted expenditures, each category we'll kind of touch on here. I'm not going to go too in depth. As we look at the materials and services, the decrease there is primarily due to an approximate $1.6 million decrease in contractual services associated with the distribution of ARPA funds, and other savings are realized as a result of one-time program funding spend down, or as a result of cost controls by various departments to realize savings. Through the special payments, there's a decrease by about $97,000, but overall the expenditures there within that category are relatively status quo. For capital outlays, the decrease there is a result of postponing facility renovations that were adopted in the 23-24 budget and forecasted over a 3-year period to complete. Some of these projects include renovations of the Duane Street Annex to create more office space and alleviate space constraints in the 800 and 820 facilities. Until there's more clarification or clarity from the state around the revenue replacement for the county to address financial impacts associated with the implementation of the adopted HCP, staff is delaying moving forward with this extensive capital project. And you'll probably hear that common theme as we're going through the rest of these areas. Transfers are increasing by about 2.4 million over the prior year budget. That increase is related to an increase of ARPA funds to the special project funds to address the aging infrastructure in the courthouse and the 800-820 exchange facilities. If anybody's not aware, we have elevators in each of these buildings that have reached their useful service life, and to ensure that ADA access is maintained, we'll need to have significant improvements made. In addition, there's also an increase in the transfer from the general fund stabilization fund to the general fund. This transfer is necessary to reflect a balanced budget per ORS 294. However, it is anticipated to not occur County management will be monitoring expenditures closely and making mid-year adjustments as necessary to minimize the necessity of the transfer. Lastly, for the contingency, the decrease there is primarily associated with the decreased contingency associated with the general fund stabilization transfer. As we shift gears and we're looking at the proposed 24-25 revenue, the increase in revenue is mainly contributed to the projected increases in state revenue of about 1.4 million. There's also an increase in other intergovernmental revenue of nearly 800,000 from Road District Number 1 for county road maintenance construction and from Rural Law Enforcement District for enhanced services in the unincorporated areas of the county. Some of the other areas that we're seeing some increases are in interest revenues. I've also seen an increase of about $500,000 over the prior year. And most all these increases are offset by decreases in charges for services of about $1.3 million, which is primarily contributed to the restructuring of the fleet management role within Public Works. From there, we'll shift and just looking at the general fund as a standalone. Again, looking at general fund revenues. General fund revenue is expected to see an increase of approximately 2.6 million. This is primarily due to increases in transfers, state revenues, and other revenues for a cumulative total of approximately 2.5 million. Licenses and permits associated with transient room tax revenue are anticipated to increase by approximately 116,000. The transient room tax revenues are collected and utilized to promote county tourism, provide public road and drainage improvements, jail operations, and discretionary allocation for general government activity.
I see Counselor Montero has a question.
Please.
On the revenue transfers in, is that a transfer in from contingency funds?
So I would say the lion's share of that transfers in is referring back to the general fund stabilization transfer to make the general fund whole for the year.
And
Okay.
I'll just chime in on that. So as Andy previously mentioned, per budget law, we do have to balance the budget. And so while we budget a contingency of 10% of our total expenditures, very rarely does that contingency get spent, but we still have to balance to it. And so that is the purpose of the general fund stabilization transfer. So as he mentioned, the likelihood that that transfer is going to take place is pretty slim.
Okay.
Thank you for clarifying.
Excuse me, Andy, if I could, Commissioner Thompson, if you don't mind. I just want to explain a little bit more about the Revenue Stabilization Fund. So this is a fund that we set aside as a special fund that does have general fund resources in it that we just set aside as part of our reserves. And it grows every year minimally by the interest earnings that it's earning. And so when you think about the reserves for the county, it is the part of the ending fund balance includes this other fund, which is the Revenue Stabilization Fund. So I know it's a little awkward when we talk about a transfer from the general fund back into the, from a special fund into the general fund, but it's all general fund discretionary resources. We're just using it to get to the balanced budget, thinking that that transfer is not going to be made. So I just want to explain a little bit about how that works. Thank you.
Thank you, County Manager. So moving on from revenues, we'll be looking at the general fund expenditures. As we're kind of looking at the different categories, the personnel services, which include salaries and benefits, are increasing in the general fund from the current year by approximately 1.5 million, or about 6%. And although there's an overall decrease of 1.6 FTE in the general fund, this increase is associated with cost of living adjustments to employees wages by about 3.5%, as well as budgeted rate increases associated with healthcare, retirement costs, and other payroll tax increases. An increase of $630,000 is seen in the materials and services budget, and this is primarily associated with a Criminal Justice Commission's ODOT grant expense in the amount of $508,000. This is going to be used to purchase and implement a new computer-aided dispatch and record management system for all county law enforcement and fire departments. There's also an increase of about $113,000 in general liability insurance, as well as an increase of nearly $200,000 in contractual services based on anticipated inflationary increases for contracted services. These material and services increases are offset by savings in various organizational units as a result of cost controls by departments to realize savings. As I think Don and Monica both mentioned, this is a team effort and everybody's looking for savings as we're operating. Touch a little bit on the remaining categories here. Special payments.
Andy, can I ask a question? I've been confused reading the budget. Are we planning to do the courthouse security upgrade this year? I know it was budgeted for last year and not spent. Is that going to be spent this year?
I can
Monica?
touch on that, Andy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that will be discussed in the special projects fund. Right now, we're just talking about the general fund. But that plan is to move forward with the courthouse security. The only portion of the capital projects that we postponed are the Duane Street Annex, which is the former jail.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Monica.
And
Looking at
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt Andy, but, and I don't know if this is what prompted your question, David, but in regards to the Criminal Justice Commission's ODOT grant expense, that is, what the county manager was referring to in regards to the record management system. So though there is a $508,000 expense, it is offset by that grant revenue as well. So if you want to go ahead and carry on, Andy, sorry about that.
You're fine, thank you. We kind of left off at the special payments category. We're seeing a decrease of about $305,000. This is a result of decreased transient room tax dollars to be used in 24-25 for public road and drainage improvements in an effort to build reserves in anticipation for a larger safety project in a future fiscal year. Some of the decreases we're seeing in the transfers and the amount of $955,000 is a result of not transferring excess timber revenues into the special projects fund for some of the reasons that we've already touched on. And contingencies is going to increase by about $84,000, which is based on board policy that 10% of the general fund expenditures be reserved in contingency. Therefore, increased expenditures results in an increased contingency amount. So the 24-25 general fund proposed budget includes use of unassigned general fund balance in the amount of approximately $3.6 million, excluding contingency. By including contingency reserves set aside in the general fund stabilization fund, along with the general fund contingency, the projected forecast for the proposed budget maintains an overall reserve balance of approximately 36%. Recognizing current economic factors as well as future impacts of reduced timber harvesting levels, management took a balanced approach to maintain sustainable growth and will continue to work with the board and staff to develop strategies to address alternative revenue streams while continuing to be cognizant of spending down reserves and contingency funds that could impact long-term sustainability. Acknowledging, as previously mentioned, that these reserve balances play a critical role in maintaining service levels. And I think to expand on the fund balance topic a little bit more, I'll hand it back over to County Manager Boone.
Thank you. Board members, budget committee, just want to go a little bit over this graph. We tend to show a graph that depicts the fund balance over time. And so this graph has a lot to it, but we're just trying to play some of the scenarios that we've talked about as part of the budget message. So the fund balance with the HCP reductions that we would anticipate is the blue line. So just with the HCP reductions, if there's not revenue replacement, if we don't have TLT, that's the blue line is where we would be. Now, granted, this doesn't take into consideration all the other decisions we would obviously make to make sure we don't ever go under that line. But this doesn't factor in all those other decisions. It just shows you kind of a straight line impact of what that would look like based upon assumptions. And so then we add in what it would look like with the revenue replacement, and that's the gray line. So obviously the revenue replacement from the state for the HCP would make a discernible difference in what that line looks like in those outer years. The conversation has been looking at the 10-year average, and so that's what we factored into this spreadsheet. Then we also added, okay, what if we had revenue replacement and we got some of the flexibility on the TLT that we talked about, then that's the yellow line. And so, you know, if we got everything that we were asking for, that puts us in a more solid position. Again, it's still going to require some expenditure reductions and some other revenue adjustments. You know, one thing that we haven't talked about is the strategic investment program that was approved by the board and by the Oregon Business Development Council recently, that will also start impacting the general fund favorably and other special districts. And that'll really start in the 25 or 26, 27 fiscal year. But Wanamill, Georgia Pacific is making $152 million investment into their plant, which is obviously good for the county for those family wage jobs. But we haven't factored those revenue sources in those out years. So so that will have an impact too. But this just basically shows that, you know, obviously HCP revenue loss would be significant without replacement. Replacement gets us better, and if we can get our entire legislative agenda passed, we would be in a better situation. So,
County Manager, do you see that Gretchen Allen, and I'm not sure if it's Gretchen or Clara who has the question, but a hand is raised.
sure.
Your graph is different than what's in the book. Is it possible to get a copy of this? Clara and I were noticing that.
Yes, we can definitely send this out to you. This was something that we made an adjustment to because we did just include what it would look like if we had just the revenue replacement. But since we are having these conversations around the TLT replacement as well, or adjustments, we wanted to provide you with this additional information. So we will go ahead and send that out. I also just want to add too, if you'll notice, and we only go back to fiscal year 2021, so you can't see in prior years when we did face a recession, but you can see in the current fiscal year 23-24 where we do spike up, but now we're going down in this 24-25 fiscal year, and then you do see a steady incline based on those forecasted inflationary costs. So we are, as Dawn has mentioned multiple times, we're forecasting out status quo staffing levels, as well as programs and services provided. But as we have more clarification, you will see those decreases go down in future years if we aren't able to maintain or provide revenue replacement in the way that we are hoping to receive it.
You and Gretchen and Clara, Budget Committee, we will make sure you get an updated graph immediately after this. Get that out to you. So as we look at the some of the key assumptions for the general fund, and just kind of reiterate what's already been said here, this theme of status quo budget is going to be repeated. But those are what drives these key assumptions. The 23-24 adopted budget included the best assumptions available at the time, and projected expenditures were expected to exceed new revenues, and was adopted assuming the use of approximately 5.4 million in fund balance. However, current estimates for the adopted fiscal year 23-24 budget indicate that general fund expenditures will come in slightly less than budgeted, and will assume an approximate use in fund balance between $1.5 and $2 million, which is good to see. As we look at the proposed 24-25 general fund budget, this budget assumes a $6.9 million use of fund balance, which includes contingency. Of the proposed expenditures, 3.3 million is set aside for general fund contingency in accordance with board policy. And based on that information, as well as prior year history, the forecasted use of fund balance for 24 and 25 fiscal years estimated to be closer to 1.3 or 1.6 million. So as we're diving into the functional areas of the county, so there are 5 groups of functional areas, and we'll kind of touch on each of these. I guess just kind of by definition, a functional area can be defined as a logical grouping of activities or processes of an organization representing similar business goals or functions. Each functional area includes the proposed budgets that comprise the functional area, and greater detailed information of the county's individual budgets can be found under each of the functional area tabs. The total proposed county budget, which excludes county service districts, is approximately $98 million, which represents a decrease of about $1 million from the previous year. For the functional areas overall, the budget is decreasing slightly. These expenses are included in the functional areas of general government and land use, housing, transportation, economic development, and capital, and are offset by increased personnel costs distributed throughout all the functional areas of the proposed budget, with the greatest increase being within public safety and justice, primarily due to having the highest number of FTEs at approximately 125. Though there is a proposed countywide reduction of about 3.4 FTEs, with ongoing increases associated with cost of living adjustments to employees' wages, as well as budgeted increases for cost of health insurance and retirement, these items present ongoing challenges. And while there are many challenges for our county as an organization faces, it is through the collective efforts with our partner agencies that we identify many opportunities through the board's strategic planning process that will continue to be addressed and have been accounted for in the proposed budget. So as we kind of look at each functional area individually, for culture and recreation, this group includes areas such as the Fair and Expo, Parks and Maintenance, and Parks, Land and Acquisition. The increase of approximately 362,000 is mainly contributed to an increase in materials and services, as well as contingency within the Fair and Expo budget. These funds are primarily dedicated, with only approximately 8% that are discretionary. As we look at the land use, housing, transportation, economic development, and capital functional area, this area includes surveyor, roads, bike paths, planning, building codes, fisheries. There's a lot of areas underneath this umbrella. The decrease in capital is a result of postponing facility renovations that were adopted in the 23-24 budget and forecasted over a 3-year period to complete. As we've mentioned before, until revenue replacement has been identified from the state as a result of the reduced timber revenues, staff is delaying moving forward on these projects until better information is obtained. The dedicated resources include video lottery dollars that are to be used specifically for economic development within Clatsop County, as well as tax monies that are dedicated to county roads. Most of the remaining funds that make up this functional area maintain a status quo budget. There's an overall proposed decrease of 1.65 FTE within this functional area, all within the Public Works Division, and it's mostly a result of not filling the Public Works Assistant Director position.
So I have a question here.
Yes.
This appears to be the largest decrease in expenses. And my concern is we're in a time when housing is a dire issue. And with the reduction in timber revenues, economic development should be firmly in our minds how we're going to pursue that. How are we going to balance all this? I'm concerned that if you're taking away staff to help do things with permitting and housing and you slow that all down, we're only going to make our other problems worse.
So I'll touch on this, Andy. So as you mentioned, this functional area includes a significant number of programs. And the decrease that's being proposed, the 1.65 FTE, that's all within public works. And so this is specific to road maintenance and construction. And so part of that is when we went through the hiring process of a new public works director, we previously had an assistant public works director, and we won't be filling the assistant public works director position. We do have other management staff, and they have a plan moving forward to make sure that there is coverage in those areas, but it's not necessary to fill that vacancy. Also, there was previously a half-time position that was budgeted specific to completing some projects in the fiscal year 23-24 that is no longer necessary moving forward. And then the 0.15 is actually a cost neutral. That was an over-reporting of FTE. It was a Scribner's error in the 23-24. So though it says 0.15 decrease in FTE, there actually was never that position didn't actually exist. In regards to the $2.2 million decrease, this is again specific to the work that is around the Duane Street Annex that's being postponed. So economic development work is continuing to be moved forward. That work is funded through those video lottery dollars. And so as long as we have those video lottery dollars to maintain the service level that we're providing, which is what we anticipate in 24-25, economic development is not being impacted by these reductions.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks for clarifying, Monica. Okay, so moving over to the general government functional area. This area includes the budgets for the Board of Commissioners, county manager, as well as the budgets of county organization units whose activities are of a general government nature. Most budgets in this area are status quo, with the decrease primarily being a result of decreases in materials and services for contracts associated with the distribution of ARPA funds to various agencies countywide. This functional area indicates an overall increase of 0.3 FTE. During the 23-24 adopted budget, the board approved the unbudgeted hiring of a housing manager to address the board's strategic planning goal around housing. The overall increase of 0.3 FTE reflects a decrease of 0.5 FTE for the current vacant management policy analyst position, as well as a 0.25 FTE decrease in the senior administrative supervisor position.
And I'll touch on this a little bit more as well. So though it's showing a 0.3, again, the housing manager position is a position that's currently being funded through ARPA dollars, as well as Emergency Order 23-02 to address our homeless population, as well as our housing development. And so that is not being funded through general fund dollars. That 0.3 is offset, as Andy mentioned. So we have been holding a position vacant now for a couple of years. And this is in regards to a position that would be providing property management as well as contract management. And then we also have an existing position that is looking to reduce their FTE. And so rather than trying to fill that, we're going to just maintain those service levels with the staff that we currently have.
Thank you. Okay, moving into functional area of public health. There's an increase here is primarily a result of a $543,000 in pass-through funding for contracted mental health services. This increase is offset primarily by a decrease in school-based health center funding. Operations of this program have been transferred from public health to Columbia Health Services for more efficient service delivery and is therefore no longer run through the county. There's also a decrease of 1.9 FTE within this functional area. Of that 1.9, there is 1 FTE that is being moved under the direction of Emergency Management Office within the Public Safety and Justice functional area. The remaining FTE was for a disease intervention specialist, which the state eliminated funding for, thus the position was eliminated. And looking at public safety and justice, again, touching on some of the FTEs, there's proposed FTE decrease reflects more efficient scheduling of part-time employees and animal control, or I'm sorry, it looks like Gretchen may have a question, or Clara, one of the two.
Yeah, the school-based funding, can you say again where that went away, the funding for that went away, or is it just funded from somewhere else?
I can touch on that, Andy. So that was funding from the state, and the program did not go away. That's a school-based health center based out in the Jewel School District. For more efficient services, that is now being contracted through a different agency. So the public health department is not providing those services, so therefore we don't receive the funding for it.
Who is that different agency that's doing that?
It is the Columbia Columbia Health Services.
Okay.
It says that it's been transferred from the public health. Oh, never mind. Sorry, I was reading that wrong. Never mind.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, coming back to public safety and justice. While there are no new FTEs being requested, there's a program shift that moves the emergency preparedness program under the direction of the Emergency Management Office, where the FTE allocated to the program will be reflected. This is ongoing work to create a more coordinated disaster response in accordance with the board's strategic planning goals. So that does cover all the functional areas. And I believe at this point, I will hand it back over to Assistant County Manager Steele to go over the service districts. Thank you, Monica.
Thank you, Andy. Before moving on, just wanted to touch base to see if there were any questions over what was just presented. Doesn't appear to be any. So moving on to our service districts. And so there's primarily an increase in this for all 4 service districts. And this is primarily attributed to the increase in personnel costs associated with the rural law enforcement district. So this district, they provide the expanded services for rural law enforcement personnel that are paid for out of the enforcement division as well as Marine Patrol. And then it also is an increase in the budgeted transfer from the general road fund into the general roads maintenance and construction fund. The rural law enforcement district, as previously mentioned, this is cost share. So the personnel costs are split between rural law enforcement district as well as the general fund. And this is seen an increase of $238,000. As previously mentioned, the theme, this is primarily associated with those COLA increases as well as healthcare and PERS benefits. In addition, there is a slight increase in capital outlay to cover some of the specific equipment that rural law enforcement provides, such as a side-by-side vehicle to go out and do search and rescue work on. Road district is seeing a slight increase as well. The funds from this district are transferred and received into the road maintenance and construction. And this is supported by a property tax levy of 1.0175 per thousand and is supported by timber revenue. I forgot to previously mention that the Rural Law Enforcement District is also supported by a tax levy and is also supported by timber revenue. So both of these will also see the impacts of reduced revenues from the HCP. This budget is seeing an increase of about 660,000, and this is a result of the projected beginning balance being slightly higher. The Westport Sewer District is 100% supported by user fees. There is a slight increase in this budget as well, and this is a result of ongoing infrastructure improvements that are being supported by the ARPA funds. They have been working on this in accordance with their community plan and have been utilizing some of those community plan dollars as well as these ARPA dollars to make these infrastructure upgrades, which makes it so that this service area does not have to see significant rate increases to pay for these ongoing costs. And the final special district is the 4-H and Extension District. This one is also supported by a tax levy and also supported by timber revenue. So the county contracts with OSU to provide these extension services. And so when we get into the functional area and we're speaking specifically to this budget, you will see it as all primarily listed as contractual services. And that is again because OSU provides these services. Their focus is to provide research-based knowledge and education to strengthen communities and economies and sustain natural resources, as well as promoting healthy families and individuals. The FTE that is supported through OSU by these dollars is approximately 3.47 positions. It consists of 1.98 for admin support, 1 FTE for educational program assistance, and 0.49 FTE for a master gardener educational program. They've seen a total increase in expenditures of approximately 187,000, but this is a result of increased contingencies because they've actually seen a decrease in their personnel costs because they've had a number of long-term employees retire, and so there's reduced costs with those new positions, salaries that are being filled.
I have a question on the 4-H.
Go ahead, Tita.
What is their responsibility or interactions with the 4-H groups throughout the county?
They're actively involved with them. They have regular 4-H leader meetings. They are the ones that kind of help facilitate and provide that support to those leaders when they're looking for information and such.
And do they charge those 4-H clubs for their services?
No, they do not.
Okay.
There may be fees for different programs that they might have to, but that's not necessarily a 4-H and extension fee. It's a fee for the program to cover the cost of something that they might be trying to do.
Okay, thank you.
So this is just kind of a breakdown for the countywide budget in regards to discretionary versus dedicated resources. So general fund discretionary resources are identified throughout the budget as general fund support for those special funds that might receive general fund support, as well as just general fund for the organizational units that are 100% general fund supported, such as the county manager's office, HR, IT, those internal service functions, as well as the jail. 26% of our revenues are discretionary, and the other 74% is dedicated. It is important to note that while almost all discretionary resources are received in the general fund, not all general refund resources are discretionary. For example, the grant that the sheriff's office received for the records management software, that is received in the general fund, but it is dedicated funding. So of our total budget, approximately 28.4 million is discretionary and 109 million is dedicated. And this includes the 4 service districts that we have. Just checking to make sure that there's no questions there. So, as Dawn mentioned, and I'll just kind of kick things off and then kind of turn things back over to him to conclude this. But as we've been speaking throughout the theme of this whole budget message, that the goal that we are trying to accomplish is to really try and strike that balance between meeting our current service levels, demands, and maintaining prudent reserve levels, knowing that there are going to be some potential revenue impacts coming in the future. We continuously monitor on a daily basis all of the departments where those external factors might be impacting us and how we can make prudent adjustments mid-year. For example, those vacancies. In some instances, if it is not an immediate need, we will be maintaining vacancies. And in some instances, it might be as simple as a person is retiring or leaving the county at the end of the month. And rather than anticipating that and starting the recruitment process when we know they'll be leaving, we will start the recruitment process after they leave, holding that position vacant a couple of months until we go through that recruitment process and the new person starts. So we will continue to look at where those cost savings can come. As mentioned, the postponement of the Duane Street Annex renovations, we will look at ways, and we already have, where we can alleviate some of those space constraints that departments such as public health have been facing, and how we can utilize existing spaces in a little bit more outside of the box way. So that might be converting some conference rooms and creating office space out of those until we have more reassurances in regards to the revenue replacement. I want to thank all of our staff, all of our department heads, the Board of Commissioners, the Budget Committee, everybody who has put in many hours of hard work to comprise this budget. As we mentioned in the beginning, this is not a couple months process. This is a year-long process, and specifically the development of this budget document is a 6-month process. Andy has done a fabulous job of coming on in mid-July and learning the county's systems and processes, as well as some of the impacts that we're facing, and also dealing with an audit at the same time. So he has done a great job of trying to learn everything while at the same time producing a important document for all of you to be able to review. And again, we're just thankful that we all have the opportunity to serve our community and want to see it strive to be a better place for everyone to live. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. There's a couple questions before Dawn chimes in.
I had my, here's what I'm interested in knowing. When we're looking at these prudent adjustments, are we looking at the impact on services delivery? I mean, how is that calibrated?
Yes, that's one of the things that's being taken into consideration. So in some instances, we might not be able to maintain that. And so those are conversations that the departments are having with the county management team. So that way we aren't impacting service levels. It is Is it a situation where there might be other staff that can help out, such as the vacancy that we're gonna hold, the 0.25 FTE vacancy that's gonna be in the county manager's office? Where can we as staff pick up the additional duties that might not be able to be met by having that FTE be not at a full FTE?
I appreciate that reassurance. Thank you.
Gretchen and Clara.
So I just had a question about where you're having somebody leave and then you have a 2-month period gap. They come on without the support of the person that was there before. You know, that creates a lot of inefficiencies and sometimes even costs more to train that person. Have you taken that into account? Because that to me doesn't seem like much of a cost savings if you have inefficiencies.
We do take that into account. And again, it's, you know, where we can hold those positions vacant, we will be. Many of our departments are cross-trained. And so though that person might be leaving, it's a small department. And so many of the staff are already familiar with covering some of those duties and assignments when the person is out on vacation or sick or whatever the case may be. So it is something that staff from a management level will evaluate on a case-by-case basis. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Dawn, for any closing comments that you might have.
Sure. Thanks. I want to thank everybody again to spend the time with us. You know, I think that there'll be some interesting conversations as we move forward into 24-25, prepping for the 25-26 budget. One of the things we had put a list up early of what those required services are that the county provides. One of the things that will be on the table, though, are there services that the county is providing on behalf of the state that we might want to choose, meaning the board might want to choose to give back to the state. Because there are services that certainly benefit from local provision, but unfortunately, sometimes those services also don't pay for themselves. And so part of what we will be looking at is where is the subsidy that's coming from the general fund, and just looking at all of our options very openly about what's the best way in a sustainable manner to move forward. And so I'm only sharing that because all things will be on the table. And we'll have a long list of options with various degrees of impact. And we will quantify that for the board as we move forward. And again, hopefully we don't have to do as deep a dive on some of the expenditure reductions, but we'll be prepared to do that. So that's all that I have. I just want to thank everybody for your time. And I want to thank staff for their diligence through this whole process, and all the department staff and the elected officials. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dawn. So before we wrap things up with any questions and final thoughts, just a reminder of our next budget meeting, which will take place on Wednesday, May 8th. This will be a hybrid option. It will begin at 4 p.m. And so there will be a Zoom link available for you if you choose to participate virtually, but it'll also be taking place in the Boynton building. And so you are welcome to be in person there beginning at 4 p.m. This meeting will take place. The first portion of it is specific to the 4 special districts, which you as the lay budget committee members, you all are not necessary to be present for the special districts. We do encourage you to be there early on, though, because if we do move through those special district budgets relatively quickly, we would be able to move on to the countywide budget. And so that next budget meeting, again, is from 4 to 6 p.m. Any questions or final thoughts prior to us letting you all go for the rest of your afternoon?
Good.
Yeah.
Well, all right, then. It appears that we did have a full complement of commissioners, because even though it says Monica Steele, I'm pretty sure that's Commissioner Webb. Glad everyone was here. Thanks to the lay budget committee members. Your service is invaluable as we go forward in this to improve, to inform, to really expand our scope and our effectiveness. Thank you for your time and your commitment. I think that's it, right?
Yes, thank you, commissioners. Thank
We're
you,
done.
committee members.
We're adjourned. Thank
I-
you.